Routing is a pattern matching process that observes incoming client requests and decides what to do with each request. Blazor routing is a technique for inspecting the browser's URL and matching it to a page to render. It refers to how we set up navigation and handle the application URL. Hello everyone and welcome to the ASP.NET Core Blazor for Beginners. I am Narendra Kumar Sharma, a Microsoft certified .NET trainer. In this video, we are going to look at how you can define routes for your pages, how you can use route parameters, optional route parameters, and constraint route parameters. So we go back to our Blazor web app. To define a route, we simply add a page directive at the top of any component. Whenever we use the page directive in a Blazor component, the compiler will add the route attribute during compilation, making it available as a route. It is what differentiates regular components that are referenced within other Blazor components from routable components, usually referenced as Blazor pages. To view the intermediate C# files generated by the Razor and source compilers in Blazor project, add the emit compiler generated files property to the project file in property group and set it to true. Open project file in the property group, add emit compiler generated files and set it to true. Save the changes. Then build your project using .NET build command in command prompt terminal. .NET build, and the generated files will appear in the default output folder. Auto-generated files can be found in obj debug target framework generated folder. So let's open components underscore pages underscore counter underscore razor.g.cs file. Now in this file, locate route. So this is route attribute, microsoft.aspnetcore.components.route attribute, and it has this route /counter. So this is the attribute which is added during compilation. The page directive in component file generates a route attribute on the components class, and during startup, the Blazor scans for all classes decorated with route attribute and builds its route definitions accordingly. So every component class is derived from component base class. So if you check the component base class, it is component base. Now let's run this application and access this counter component in browser. .NET run. So here, if you click this counter, okay, root is /counter. You can have multiple routes for your component. For example, let's add another route for the counter component. So here, let's close this and stop the application by pressing Ctrl C. So let's add another route here. Add another page directive. Add page counter 2. Run the application again. Open this in browser and let's access counter using counter. So counter is accessible using /counter. Try to access this using this new route /counter2. Counter 2. So the same counter component is accessible, okay, using this new route also, counter 2. So we have added another route for this counter component. Static routes are the foundation, but dynamic routes are what we need in a real application. Dynamic routes contain parameters to pass data during page navigation. So in Blazor components, you can also have route parameters. So we use the page directive. Let's close this, stop the application. So we use the page directive to define the route. Let's use slash counter within curly braces ID. So we use slash counter, this slash counter as the static part of the route, and use curly braces to define the ID parameter as a placeholder. In the code block, now define a property of type string. Parameter public string ID. So we are defining a property of type string and name it the same as the placeholder in the route. Routes are case insensitive. Get set. This property will get populated from the route parameter on navigation. So render the value of this ID at some place in template. So let's use p element ID display value of ID. Okay, let's see what happens. So start the app and go to the browser. Open okay, so now try slash counter slash 123 and now ID is showing 123. Pass ABC, use ABC, and now it is showing ABC. Okay, so we can browse slash counter slash 123 and slash counter slash ABC. Can we still browse slash counter? So remove this and try to browse slash counter. Okay, so this is because the app doesn't have the endpoint, because the route parameter is the required part of the route. So this is the required parameter. This is the required parameter of this route. So make this ID parameter optional by putting a question mark. Rerun it. Now open this in browser and try to browse counter 123. It is working. Counter slash ABC. Okay, this component is accessible. Counter is accessible using slash ABC also. Now try to access counter without this parameter and it is working fine now, because now ID is optional. Currently we can pass no number also in URL, so we can pass here. So slash ABC, it is working. We are able to browse this counter component using counter slash ABC. Because we defined the ID root parameter of type string here. It is the default because whenever we define a URL, it is a string and can contain any type of root parameter. Let's change this property type to int. So if we only change the type of this parameter, we will get an error during navigation because the router could not pass a string argument to an integer property. So to specify the type of a route parameter, use type colon here. To specify its type, use colon int. So we use a colon followed by the type we want to use for the route parameter. So stop it. Let's see what happens now. Now open this. Try to access. Try to browse 1, 2, 3. It is working. ABC is not working because now the type of ID isn't, and without this, let's check whether slash counter is still working. Yes, it is working because it is optional. So I suggest using the correct type of route parameters. It allows for cleaner code with the page implementation. For example, we don't need to manually pass the ID from a string to int. In this implementation, it saves a few extra lines of code. The less code we write, the less potential for introducing bugs we have. Now question is, how does Blazor discovers routes? So route discovery is performed automatically by Blazor in its default project template. So if we look inside the routes.razor file, we will see the use of router component here. Here it is using router component. The router component is from the Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Components.Routing namespace, and it requires a reference to the application assembly. So here we are providing the application assembly. At startup, the router component scans all classes within the referenced application assembly, and it then reflects over the class to see if it is decorated with any route attribute. For each route attribute it finds, it parses the URL template string and adds a relationship from the URL to the component into its internal route table. A route can either be found or not found. In case it is found, we use the route view component to render the view connected with the routing information. We also specify a default layout component, layout.main layout. So the default layout is used for all the pages components, all the page components that do not explicitly specify layout using the layout directive. The next element, focus on navigate. This component allows you to focus on an HTML element after the navigation has been completed. We can use any CSS selector to define what element to focus on in navigation. The default template uses H1 selector here, which is a good default that helps screen readers understand that the page has been navigated. This is what router component, and it is already set up for you when you create Blazor web app project. Routes component is used in app.razor. This routes component. This is the route component. So routes component is used in app.razor. This is the first component that renders in response to any request that comes to our Blazor application. It is calling the routes component here. It is also adding Blazor framework script here, which enables client-side functionality. So this app component is the parent of all the other components. Routing in Blazor requires that we set the base tag in the head section of the HTML. So here we are setting the base tag. It is already set in the app.razor file. make sure to adjust this value depending on where and how you host your application in production. So routing is fundamental when working with single page applications. Blazor provides a simple yet powerful implementation of routing out of the box. It allows for rapid development of modern single page web applications. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.